Welcome, everybody, to Recirculation. Hi. I'm Memphis. I am one of the collective members at Word Up, which is the overarching bookstore organization that also runs Recirculation. And we're so excited to have you both here tonight talking about this wonderful book, talking about Queen Mother, talking about this history. So firstly, who here is this their first time at Recirculation? Okay, a lot of newcomers. Welcome. So what we're sitting in right now is a community bookstore, primarily run by volunteers. It's a project of Word Up Community Bookshop, which I just mentioned a second ago. So Word Up started about 14 years ago as a pop-up bookshop across the street from the United Palace, and lived there for about 15 months before, very classic New York story, the landlord changed. And we got kicked out into people's apartments, into storage. And then we landed on the corner of 165th and Amsterdam, where we've been for 12 years. And this space, Recirculation, opened up a few years ago. It came after, so one of our early collective members, who was really active when we were in our first space as a pop-up, he actually passed away from COVID. But prior to being put on a ventilator, he hit up our founder, Veronica, and he gave her the keys to his apartment, the keys to his storage units, which contained tens of thousands of books and also records. The first stopping place for that collection was here. Some of them went out to other locations, but it's also the foundation of Recirculation, which is named after a records circulation project that he used to run in Texas. His name was Tom Burgess. And kind of in line with that, and in line with a lot of what we do, we are an event space, we're a book space, we're a community space, primarily volunteer run. We have books in English and Spanish, programming in English and Spanish for all ages. And we try and connect our community and ourselves. We're also a kind of community in and of ourselves because we have so many volunteers. Great way of being connected with us is volunteering with us, to all sorts of stories and histories and that are our own and others, and making those connections. So I'm so excited to welcome both of you here tonight.
First of all, I want to thank you and your editorial team for inviting me to be your interlocutor tonight, this evening. And I've been to Recirculation before. I love this space. It's my kind of bookstore. And I just hope more and more people find out about it and what it does. So my name is Tamara Payne. I am the co-author of the book, The Dead or Alive in Life of Malcolm X, with my father, Les Payne. This came out in 2020, and it was just a cradle-to-grave biography of Malcolm X. And okay, we won awards, and I'll just leave it at
just
that.
A few.
But it was a 30-year journey to work on this book with my father, and learning so much from him about journalism, storytelling, and writing. And I'm just honored for that experience, and to be able to. My father passed away in the middle of writing that, and I was able to finish this. I worked with him on this from the beginning, and now that it's out in the world, and I'm so happy. And now I'm very familiar with the process of publishing books. So when I hear of people who are publishing their books, I understand. I understand the pain.
Yes.
So congratulations on birthing your book.
Thank you. And I'm Ashley Farmer. I am a professor at UT Austin, and I write books about Black women radicals.
Okay, so I guess we will just jump in.
Why don't we jump in?
First of all, we're going to talk a little about Queen Mother Audley Moore. First of all, let's just honor her in that she, for many years, has been a fixture here in Harlem. This is her neighborhood. These are her streets. And, I don't know if anybody here is familiar with her story here. I grew up listening, to how important she was to the community as one who is here part of the history. I've always told about how she had mentored Malcolm X, and she ran with everybody like John Henry Clark and and all the elders. So I've heard all these stories over the years, and I even met her in the late '90s.
Oh,
yeah. Well, not late '90s; it was actually middle '90s, and unfortunately, she was, her health wasn't good, and she was being wheeled around to different events, but. I was so excited when I heard, actually through a panel you did through Bio,
Oh, yeah.
with Carla Kaplan, and you were talking about your work on this book. So I was saying, so excited to hear that this story was coming out. So congratulations again.
Thank you.
So I just kind of want to start with, how did you learn about Queen Mother Audley Moore, and why did you choose to write a biography about her?
0 out of 10, do not recommend. I would say that, so I study Black women radicals, and I wrote a book called Remaking Black Power. And every time I talk to somebody about the Black Power movement, whether it was the Panthers, whether it was cultural nationalists, almost all of them had a story about Queen Mother Moore. It was the first time they had heard about reparations. They had heard her speak and were ignited and kind of politicized in that particular moment, or they just were energized by her level of like political education. So I started to look around and see what was there about her, and there was nothing save like maybe a blog post. And I soon realized why, because all these things that we think should be somewhere, like these things that are pictured in here in the photo from her apartment in Harlem, seem to more or less have disappeared. Some people have a few things here or there, and there's all kinds of stories about where this stuff has gone. But I think by and large, no one could seem to kind of amass a large enough archive to talk about her. But I was also just like floored, right? I mean, she is, I don't know, like the word is like Gumpian, maybe, like in that she's kind of at every major moment in the 20th century, from the Harlem Renaissance to the Depression. She survives 2 wars, right? She's hanging out with Malcolm, she's hanging out with Farrakhan. There is no moment in the 20th century where she is not there, and also not leaving her mark about what she thought about Black nationalism. So I was just completely stunned that there was nothing about her but somebody who was so prevalent and everybody had a story about. And so she kind of haunted me while I was writing other stuff in the form of me finding things in various places. And finally, when I felt like I got to maybe critical mass, I took a shot at it, which was very hard.
Yeah. So we're going to get a little bit more into that, because where do you start? Where do you begin with that?
So the tough thing about writing about these kinds of women most of the time is that their most complete kind of accounting of their lives is their FBI file, right? They don't have these archives, but for the better part of 50 years, the FBI followed Queen Mother Moore, even well before the start of COINTELPRO. So in this weird moment, if you wanted to just make like a timeline, a basic timeline of who she was and how she got started, they were the people that had the most information. They followed her every day and went to every meeting and told you everybody she talked to. They were, in effect, like scrapbooking. They were cutting out, you know, the articles that were in the newspaper that you would never find otherwise, you know, like the random newspaper in Alabama, and be like, oh, she was there. And putting it there. Sometimes they had photos that no one else seemed to have or be able to put their fingers on. So for better or worse, that's where I had to start. And, you know, we can talk about the ethics, right, of also beginning your work in a place of state surveillance for someone who was trying to hide out for state surveillance for many years.
And even when we were doing our work on Malcolm X, finding out the records that the FBI had, because they were well into their COINTELPRO phase there, that they were accurate on timelines, but not on interpretation.
Yes.
So if you wanted to find out what happened and when it was, I would definitely go to the timeline of the FBI.
Yeah.
But I wanted to ask a little bit more about her earlier records, like her birth records. And like, how was that? Because I understand you had to start with the Catholic parish records.
Yeah.
Right?
So we didn't have birth certificates for Black folks in general, right, at the turn of the century. But
and let me just mention that she was born in 1898.
She was born
died in 1997.
Yes.
So this is the period of time we're looking at.
So she's born in 1898 in New Iberia, Louisiana. So not much of a record anywhere there. But for better or worse, the Louisiana Catholic Church has a lot of these records and parish records that we would otherwise not have. So there's no birth certificate per se, but the Catholic Church was a huge boon in that circumstance. But then, you know, to kind of develop her girlhood, you kind of had to do conjecture, right? There's times when she was born fairly well off. And so there were a lot of records from her family because they were in societies like the Jeune Amie, and they were considered Creoles, so they had money and land. But once she gets orphaned in her late teen years, she kind of falls out of the historical record. And so there you have to do a little bit of world building and just try to figure out what would have been like to be a Black girl in New Orleans at this time. But that also, I think, offered an opportunity to, I don't know, maybe speculate, but at least, play with build a world that was, helped readers maybe see her life a little bit better than just sticking so specifically to the record.
Right. So a lot of world building and understanding what was the context of the times, correct? But I also want to mention that a lot of those records that you were looking at for the Catholic parish were not in English, right?
They were not. Little known fact, I was a French major, Spanish major in college, because I do so much with that now. But because Louisiana changed hands so much from France to Spain to America, this was the one time it actually came in handy. Because I was like, how about this? Because a lot of the records were in French, and I was able to translate those. So, you never know when a skill will come in handy.
So study foreign languages.
Study foreign languages.
Getting back to Audley Moore now.
Yeah.
What was her childhood like? What was that world like for her?
I mean, my girl was living for a second. Absolutely living. A very good life by Black people means, in Jim Crow, Louisiana. Her father was a man of property, a man of money. He had houses in New Iberia and in New Orleans. Her mother was considered somebody that was a Creole and of kind of high society. She also spoke French. And for a good amount of time, they were what we would consider kind of elite Black folks. She went to an all-Black girls Catholic school. She was part of, dances and balls and cotillions, that kind of world until she was orphaned. And in the book, actually, there's a great photo of her, like when she's 16 and like her full-on like cotillion look. I don't know, you can imagine what that's like, which is a, very big contrast to the woman that we get over here at the end.
And I kind of want to get a little bit also into what her sense of self might have been like with her family, because he's saying that her parents were together, and this is you're talking about an elite Black family. So what is her sense of self at this point?
I think it's complicated. On the one hand, her dad practiced self-defense. He owned a gun and he stood up to white supremacists in New Orleans. So I think she got the sense that Black people had a place in the world, that they were owed their space and their self-determination. But they also gave her a complicated understanding of class, right? Where for a long time she looked down on other Black people who did not have as much as her, and was kind of being trained to be part of an elite. She used to call herself a bourgeois little stinker. That was her term, not mine. But that should tell you how she understood that she was supposed to be somebody who was supposed to be proud in being Black, but a certain kind of Black, right? And that all changed, after she was orphaned and had to fend for herself. So one of the things that is just really interesting about her is it's an unlikely story. Like, there's nothing about her early upbringing that would suggest that she would become this activist. So it's a reminder that how you start out and where you end up, is not always the same,
I'm going to fast forward a little bit now to her father, we're talking about her sense of self and her father dying, and I want to kind of tie that how when she meets Marcus Garvey and how this is connected.
Yeah.
Does it expand with Marcus Garvey after the meeting? But let's talk about that meeting.
Yeah,
it's really fascinating.
It's the best story she ever tells. So at this point, she's a domestic worker. She's cleaning white women's houses to make ends meet and taking care of her sisters. And she's married a Jamaican man who introduced her to Marcus Garvey and his Black nationalist group, the UNIA. And the story as she tells it is that one day she's walking into the Longshoremen's Hall, a meeting place in New Orleans, and she's walking kind of heavy because she has a gun in her bra, another one in her pocketbook, and her husband's got a suitcase full of bullets. And they're going to see Marcus Garvey, who was barred from speaking the night before because the white police force didn't want him, galvanizing Black folks in New Orleans. And so she says they get in there and everybody's kind of nervous because the police file in as well, and they don't know whether they're going to allow him to speak and who's going to make the first move. So all of a sudden, Marcus Garvey comes bounding in, apologizing for not being able to speak. and the police officers come draw their guns. And then she says that all of the Black New Orleanians then draw their guns in kind. And there's like one video of her doing this, and she does the finger guns, which I think is important. And she says that they say in unison, "Speak, Garvey, speak, Garvey, speak." Yeah. And this makes the white police officers so scared to see Black people defending themselves that they file out of there and let Marcus Garvey speak. And so for a young girl who was down on her luck, who had been watching white police brutalize Black folks for most of her life, this was an awakening for her to see something like that. And then once she listens to Garvey, he tells her that she should be proud that she's Black, that she descends from African kings and queens, that Black people all over the world are powerful. And she's captivated by that message and becomes a Garveyite then and there.
And in this meeting, it was in 1922. How old was she at that point?
You know I'm bad at math.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, let's go with
I was
that.
like, better know the wrong age. Historian, not math.
Okay, so after this
Yeah.
meeting and her whole worldview
Yeah.
is changing
Yeah.
now, and she starts groups, or she gets into groups where she is focusing on Black issues and it's almost like dealing with prison work, right? Dealing with, you can talk about more with the prison work that she's doing.
Yeah. So she's everywhere. She works for the Communist Party for a while and eventually comes back to New Orleans. And I love this group that she creates in the late 1950s because I think it really epitomizes her. So I want you to imagine like a group of like middle-aged Black ladies that were Garveyites hanging out, but also going and trying to free Black men from Angola jail in Louisiana who were on death row. And by going to free them, I mean that like they're about to die and the electric chair, and they're going around and trying to find evidence to exonerate them, sometimes days or hours, right, before they're executed, sometimes successfully. So doing that kind of work, she also found a little lover in prison, a man 40 years her junior. So that was a whole other life. But then also it's in this group that she starts to think about reparations. They're kind of sitting around and realizing that not only have Black people been struggling through slavery, but also, again, this is the early 60s, another 100 years since slavery with Jim Crow. And, who is gonna, kind of make amends for this with money, but also psychologically, culturally, all of these things. And they start thinking about what a repayment might look like. And, for some folks to be doing that, particularly Black women in the late 50s, early 60s, right when we're going to like the March on Washington and the sit-ins and the height of the civil rights movement was a really radical moment. So this little group, though small, was mighty and had real effects in everyday life, but also, started the idea of reparations that now for us is all, whether you agree with it or not, you know what it is, right? It's in our vocabulary in a way because of that work at in the middle of the century.
Yeah, and with that, we just skipped over Harlem. So
We did skip over Harlem.
but she does go to Harlem, and that was an important part of her life
Yeah.
too, particularly for her organizing work with this group that you're talking about. So what happened when she got to Harlem? She leaves for Harlem, right? After she comes after she meets Marcus Garvey.
Yeah. But he's gone basically almost by the time she gets here. And she's part of the Great Migration. She goes to California trying to find a better life. She goes to Chicago trying to find a better life. And everybody tells her Harlem is the place where Black people are free in the middle of Jim Crow. And so she gets here and the UNIA is dissipated because Marcus Garvey was deported. But what is here is the Communist Party. And they're talking like Garvey did, talking about how Black people deserve a nation. But it's also the height of the Great Depression, and they're doing things like giving people food and making sure that they don't get kicked out of their houses and making sure that they don't get price gouged when they go to buy food, So it's very material whether or not people really get down with the Communist Party or not. And that's where she says she really learns to organize day to day, like just on the pavement, pounding, going on doors, trying to organize for people. And it's also where she meets really amazing folks like Paul Robeson, Claudia Jones, Vicki Garvin, all of the folks that are known luminaries around Harlem, particularly Black women. Yeah.
And I only bring up Vicki Garvin because we interviewed Vicki Garvin for our book. She saw Malcolm at different phases of his life. So she saw him when he was Detroit Red. She saw him later when he was a preacher on the ladder, and then she also saw him in Ghana. So you got to talk about Vicky Garvin more as an organizer, as she was in the Communist Party.
She was, yeah. And at this time, the Communist Party was very much a progressive party. It kind of backed away from some of its more radical stuff because it's the middle of the war, and is promoting civil rights and ended Jim Crow, the idea that we're going to end Nazism abroad, right, and end Jim Crow at home. And she was one of the foremost leaders. She was organizing for voting rights. She was organizing for employment rights, organizing for women to be able to vote more broadly. I know in 1920 they did. Yeah.
And it was also interesting what the Communist Party was also preaching at that point as far as what the position of black people in the country was.
Yeah.
As being like a separate nation within this nation and having our rights. And also we even have her, meaning Audley Moore, even talking about human rights at this point through the Communist Party's language.
Yeah.
But I always found what I found really fascinating was that how the Communist Party was using Garvey's language, you know, to appeal to black people.
And it worked,
Yeah, and it worked.
It worked.
Yeah.
I'd also say Harlem is also where she first saw Malcolm X, right? And saw him speak and was captivated in the same way that she was captivated like she was with Garvey. And there are notes and kind of missives flying back and forth among kind of older activists being excited by him because they hadn't seen anybody be able to kind of captivate people in the same way in a long time, and they're trying to think about how to mold him and mentor him, even though he ends up, you know, going to the Nation of Islam for a while. For a while. A little bit of time.
So
yeah.
When did she meet Malcolm X? When he was a minister in the Nation of Islam in Harlem, or when he was traveling down to Philadelphia?
So she says the first time she heard him speak, right? And she was like, who is this young man, right? And she tries to kind of go up to him and talk to him. They meet briefly, but not much. She moves to Philadelphia, and it's there she kind of is, her house is kind of a meeting ground of black nationalists. Old Garveyites come, folks from the Revolutionary Action Movement come, anybody that is an organizer in Philadelphia, her home is kind of the hub. And so as Malcolm is climbing in his stature in the Nation of Islam, when he goes to Philadelphia, this is where people tell him he needs to go, not only because is there someone there who is a studied organizer that he needs to learn from, but also because it's the meeting ground of people like him, right? And people said that when he would go to her house, you know, he would just kind of sit down and listen and shut up, right? He wasn't this kind of, you know, he didn't have that kind of bravado then, because he understood the Garvey connection, and he understood that she had a lot of value to teach him in terms of the science of organizing, even if he didn't feel like he could put it all in action in the Nation of Islam.
Right, and this is also when we find Malcolm X in the Nation of Islam is having issues too, because what we also have when she's also talking about the separate nation for black people, she's speaking about this in the Communist Party, and Nation of Islam at the time is also talking about a separate black nation, but it's not the same concept.
No, it's not. And, you know, it's something that evolves over time for her. First, she thinks we should go back to Africa because she's a Garveyite. Eventually, she kind of settles on we should be here. And then I think the thing that is really interesting about Queen Mother Moore is that she was able to say, if you can't get down with everything I'm talking about, I can still organize with you to kind of make day-to-day life better for black people. But as she was doing that, right, she would say, hey, do you ever wonder why the American government doesn't help us out? Hey, have you ever wondered if we could think about things differently? So I think she had a really amazing way of kind of meeting people where they were, not having to be the exact same page in order to organize, and understanding that anybody could be kind of primed to think about black nationalism, even if they weren't there, if you just kind of worked alongside them and got them thinking about all the things that were wrong with America, so to speak. Right?
You know, and what's really, when I was reading that part of the book, I was really interested in just how she was engaging these conversations. You know, gaining her education. Okay, she didn't go to college. She didn't go to high school, right? You know, and look, Malcolm didn't go to high school either. And, you know, but this whole thing of education, right? While it is a sense of how we get ourselves free, you still get an education through the work that you're doing. So she was able to get an education through the Communist Party and her organizing, through listening to the people, you know, because everybody was engaged. Everybody's, you know, this was a time when people were really engaging with what does our future look like, right? And
they were reading.
How do we change, right?
Reading.
Right. And so I thought that was really, you know, interesting to also make sure we talk about that education looks different. You know, we shouldn't put down people because they don't have a degree or a diploma. You know, so.
Yeah, I mean, she only had about a third, fourth grade education, but she was studied. She both was humble enough to know what she didn't know and learned a lot. She read voraciously. You know, she was in community with a lot of folks. Like, she got together, they read something and talked about it instead of, you know, arguing online about it. And I think that forms a different kind of political consciousness. But I mean, you could even see just from, you know, the stuff that she has here. I mean, she was always surrounded by books and always looking to learn more. But she also sometimes had a little bit of an inferiority complex about it, right? She felt that sometimes she was moving in circles that she didn't have the education to be in. Or that she would second guess herself because she didn't have a degree and because she didn't have the formal education, even though obviously she was incredibly knowledgeable.
Yeah, and that's kind of upsetting about how we kind of get our own ways that way.
Yeah.
But she was really incredible as far as how she was relating. Because when you think about it, even after she leaves the Communist Party, because when she sees Malcolm, is she in the Communist Party when she sees
By the
Malcolm?
time she's done, she leaves them about 1950.
Okay.
Yeah.
She leaves in 1950. And that's heartbreaking how she leaves, right?
Yeah. She. I mean, one of the things that's really interesting is that, you know, people disappoint her throughout her life, right? She feels like, you know, she has her foot on her gas and a vision of how Black people need to move, and often feels frustrated that people won't catch up, and that people don't see the vision. And I think for a long time she felt like the Communist Party was a place where she could do that, and eventually she kind of realized that wasn't. But separate from that, it was her community, right? That's where her friends were. That's where, you know, her sisters also organized. Like, that was her place. So leaving it not only was hard politically, but it meant a real rupture of her life, right? Her community, and she felt very lost for a long time because of that.
Yeah, and it was also, to me, a case of, you know, where you're in these organizations, you know, you're taking the skills that you gain and you take them with you when you end up leaving. Yeah, it's a divorce and it's horrible when you go through that mourning period, but you have these skills and that you can still use them because nobody can take that from you.
Yeah.
So this story of her is why it's amazing. I'm so glad you're bringing that to the forefront about who she is as an activist and bringing out, you know, and as a woman.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's struggle time. And getting back to this thing with her and Malcolm X, him being in the Nation of Islam, Elijah Muhammad, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, he had his tenets, and he did not want, you know, to be involved with the American system as far as voting, fighting in the military, you know, and they definitely weren't talking about reparations.
No, not at all.
But Malcolm definitely was listening to the language of it and processing this because this is stuff that he takes in, and definitely when he finally leaves the Nation of Islam in 1964, he takes that with him. Yeah. You know, and Queen Audley, well, at that time she's still Audley Moore, right? Because I want to get into how she becomes Queen Mother.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So she says that, you know, she gets the honorific first from a group of African students here in Harlem who she helps when they don't have food, when they don't have a place to do their homework. She felt very upset. She literally gets like a little storefront, a typewriter, and a soup kitchen and helps them out. And for that, they start to call her their Queen Mother because they feel as though she's being a mother to them in the kind of most physical sense, but also because they recognize that she was mentoring and mothering folks in the movement. But in 1972, she goes to Ghana, where she is formally kind of installed or crowned as a Queen Mother by the Ashanti tribe. And at that point, she was recognized globally for her work in the Black freedom movement. And people believed that not only should she be honored as an elder, but also it's a moment when African nations are becoming free. And Black folks in Africa need allies and want points of connection with Black folks in America. And many people there, whether that was Ghana, whether that was Nigeria, Tanzania, see Queen Mother as kind of a conduit or a representative of somebody of Black America because of her work, right? So not only does she go to Ghana, but she goes to Tanzania, I said, Nigeria, and all of these places she's kind of feted as like an elder of the movement by famous African statesmen. And again, I think it is an honor to her, but it's also a bit of a political play, right? They hope that she forges some of the connections between Black Americans that they feel they need to get support for continuing to decolonize and become their own nations.
Yeah, and also this is continuing, well, and I won't say, it is part of what Malcolm X was trying to do too, in setting up, because when he was traveling around Africa, he was meeting nation leaders and trying to get their interests. So this is all part of that.
Yeah.
That
This
movement
idea
and the
that
work.
you could make a kind of a Black world, that everybody could be connected, and that we were stronger that way than kind of being divided, right? In all of these different ways. Yeah.
So that was fascinating to me, just reading that part about her in this book. So, and I loved how you're talking about how she became Queen Mother, and then also just how she stayed with this, right? From, we're talking
So long.
1920s all the way to the end.
Yeah.
She's traveling. And I will say this, because during our conversation, I'd say, I was reading in your book that she was supposed to be at the Fourth World Conference of Women, 1995 in China. I actually went, and I said, I don't remember her being there.
She didn't quite make it.
But she did make it to the Million Man March.
Yes, she did. Yeah.
And she spoke there.
She tried to. So her last public appearance was at the Million Man March. So just to give you a span of somebody, being born in 1898 and then still being on stage in 1995, that's, quite a life. But she's brought there in part because we see a resurgence in Black nationalism in the 90s, right? With the rise of Spike Lee's, work and especially here in Harlem. And folks like Louis Farrakhan are not only honoring her for her work, but also kind of, I guess how you say, using her to be a blessing, right? If Queen Mother is here and is approving of your stuff, then you are in the right, you're a part of the movement. So she was kind of anointing in that way. But she did have a lot of support for that version of nationalism in the 1990s. She still felt like it was the best and most viable way forward for folks, even so, yeah.
So I'm thinking back to that now, and what she was doing then, because we're still talking about a lot of these things. What does it mean? What's this future? And we're still kind of right now entering this period of questioning what this is going to look like.
Yeah.
What are some of the takeaways?
Yeah.
Would you say we could take away from Queen Mother Moore?
So Black nationalism is, I think, hard for a lot of people to get on board with, the idea that Black people should totally separate. But I think that whether or not you can get down with that whole idea, what Queen Mother Moore teaches us is to keep your political imagination broad, right? To say that like nothing is this way because it has to be this way, and we can always imagine a different way things could go. And I think one of the things that Black nationalists do best is just offer us different ways of thinking about how we want to relate to America, different ways of thinking about how we want to relate to each other. And I think that's an important thing to think about, especially in this moment. I think also, her life is really just a story of staying the course, right? Like she decided that she had a vision for something, and she stuck with it to the peril of herself financially, to the peril of her health, to the peril of her personal relationships by and large. And it meant that because she was kind of fixated on that, all of her decisions were moving her in that direction, even if it wasn't these wholesale leaps. And she knew she wasn't going to see that probably in her lifetime, right? But I think that there's something really comforting and valuable about reading about somebody that stays the course no matter how the world shifts under their feet. And also you can see how the world comes back around to you, right? There's sometimes when this was really out of favor. There's sometimes when this is more in favor. And she didn't sway with it. She stayed there. So if, you're feeling in this moment like, you don't really understand which way to go, and you're feeling in this moment like, how do you stay true to something when you feel like your ideas or your values might be in the minority? I think she's a good reminder of how to do that and how to live with integrity and just, keep your eye fixed on what you think is best, right?
Yeah. So that's kind of all I have.
Okay. All right. Maybe some
Do you have any
questions.
questions from the audience?
Well,
Hi. Good to see you.
good to see you.
Do you want to introduce yourself?
Pardon?
Do you want to introduce yourself?
Well, I'm in your book.
Yes, you are.
And you interviewed
Yes.
me and
Yeah.
my very good friend, the son of Queen Mother.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to say something about the cover.
Mm-hmm.
That's my friend Tom's home. He's surrounded himself
Mm-hmm.
with so much of Africana. You've been to his home.
Yes.
So you see, he even has a.
He has this picture right here. I know for sure too.
Yes,
in
yes.
his house. Yeah.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
but do you have the one of his tomb in the living room?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That
Yeah.
Tomb, yeah.
Yeah.
Tomb. What was that? Tutankhamun? Or that?
Yeah.
Anyway, I was the one who was deputized,
Mm-hmm.
walking along the Bronx, but I always had heard Queen Mother on the streets,
Mm-hmm.
Convent Avenue, everywhere, and I mean, I have stories to tell, but anyway, I went to Africa and
Mm-hmm.
with my daughter who wanted to be here tonight, but she had a health conference. She's a doctor.
Okay.
She has a conference and she couldn't be here.
Mm-hmm.
And Dr. Shahiri Turner, she works with a team of with doctors on mental health. And she was on Meet the Press. Check it out. Sorry, I have to give my little commercial.
Absolutely.
But what can I say? Going to Africa, the motherland, was an experience, And I remember my daughter, being very young, extremely young. She sat on the lap of Idi Amin.
Oh yes, I should say that he accompanied her to Uganda.
Yeah, because I was deputized.
Yes, yeah.
She made me her press secretary.
Yes.
Okay.
Then I realized what the press had to go through. When we got there, we were Harvard used to see the way we were treated. Wow.
Yeah.
But anyway, going to Africa and sitting on the lap. She was sitting on the lap, just a child. It's my wife at the time, wonderful best friend, Beth Turner. She publishes Black Masks. I don't know if you ever heard of that, but it deals with with artists of color. It's been on for 40 years. She publishes from Florida now. Have to get the commercials in. No, but it's been a nice journey. I'm still working. I'm an actor, and Queen Mother had me shooting her with a film the whole time we were in Africa. Oh, shoot that! Over here, over there. Shoot, she was very much the director.
Yes,
know.
yeah. And
But,
you're great friends with Tom, her son, who is still alive and
Yes.
and lives in Philadelphia now.
Yes.
And you guys were do you want to talk a little bit about where you guys lived or grew up?
Oh, we lived he lived in the Bronx. It was called the Workers Cooperative Apartments, or the Coops. It was called.
Allerton. Mm-hmm.
Anybody heard? Allerton Avenue. That's right. Yeah. We just had a big reunion at the Bronx Historical Society.
Yeah.
Up on I guess Bainbridge or wherever. But that's so they had to try to get the old neighborhood to be in touch with each other, Zooming, and Canada Lee came out of there, Carl Lee, actors came out of there, Stanley Kramer. That whole neighborhood was vibrant, with artists. I'm fortunate I live in something similar to that now, an artist community. Don't know if you've heard of Manhattan Plaza. Yeah, but artists. I came from 43rd Street up here, got here at 5 o'clock. I thought it would be open. But I had a good pizza while I was waiting. But anyway, I mean, what can I say? I mean, the woman was the world. I mean, I remember her in street corners on Convent Avenue in Harlem, near that pool on 145th Street. She'd be on a box talking. I'm sure others you must know. I know you mentioned that. No, I mean, I'm just saying, because you mentioned something but that whole thing about speak. I mean, that was amazing.
That was her favorite story.
And as much as I was around her, she didn't speak much about herself. That's why I went and, I'm sorry I jumped ahead and got the book from Amazon. But I got to, you know.
Lilith.
I want to see, am I in here?
You are indeed.
No, thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you for spending time and sharing,
Thank
you know, what you know about. Yeah.
You go to Philadelphia too next,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, well, you'll meet all the Warners there.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but what was your name?
Charles Turner.
Charles Turner. It's nice to meet you. Thank you so
Nice to
much.
meet you all. Glad to be here.
Any other questions or Dr. Ford?
So first I want to say congratulations. This book has been a long time in the works, at least a decade, right? I feel like when I met you, you were working on the earliest parts of this idea. I think that this book definitely enters into, you know, a conversation with other biographies written about Black women who were involved in the broader civil rights, Black freedom movement around the globe. And so I'm curious if you feel like in telling this story that it departs from some of those things that we might see as the conventions of a Black freedom movement biography, or did you find yourself in the writing process kind of conforming to some of those conventions, or does Queen Mother's life, by telling her story, this story that we haven't heard, and definitely not with the detail that you've explained it to us, does it fundamentally shift how we understand the archetypal figure of a Black woman in the movement, and also the genre of the Black freedom movement biography?
Oh man, that's a lot of questions. So I think that what is different, what I think we often do in Black freedom movement biographies, for better or worse, is it is a story of triumph, typically. And I think I will leave it up to you to decide if this is a story of triumph or not, right? I think it is a life well lived, but you know, there isn't some big resolution at the end where she reaches she gets a civil rights landmark, right? Or she has a lot of dreams that are unrealized, right? So I think that when we talk about the movement, we always want to pin it to something where somebody struggled, they achieved something, and so therefore it's a model that we can do that too. And the reality is a lot of things that she wanted did not come to fruition. So what does that tell us about how we understand the ebbs and flows of the movement? How does it understand about what it means to be an activist in terms of winning some and losing some? And what does it mean to be like the struggle part of the Black freedom struggle, which I think is interesting. I also think it's a very much kind of a ground level understanding of the Black freedom movement. She, besides the Communist Party, she's not part of a bunch of major organizations that are really noticeable to folks, like not the NAACP, right? Not SNCC, you know? She's kind of the anti that. And so most of what we have are folks that go in and out of those major organizations, which is really useful, but is only part of the story. So you get to see what somebody that's moving, literally working maybe with just like a handful of folks this place and a handful of folks this place, but still moving the needle sometimes at the national, international level. So I think it changes our understanding of scale and kind of what major organizations matter. And then, you know, I think we like our Black freedom movement leaders, for better or worse, young, male, and frozen in time. And by that I mean, like, you know, the young male, you know, either they were cut down in their prime too early, like a Malcolm or a Martin, or even if they keep organizing, we don't really talk about their later life after they were maybe in their 30s. And then, you know, usually they're confined to the Harlem Renaissance, right? The Depression, the wars. Moore doesn't fit that very easily. So it's harder for her to track, which I think is why she hasn't written about, but it also shows you the continuities between all of these moments that we try to kind of divide up in our mind. So I do think that she deserves to be among the pantheon of leaders, but I do think that her story challenges a lot of the kind of tropes that we talk about with the Black freedom movement.
Yeah, I don't know that it challenges the tropes. I would say that it definitely, her story and her journey certainly supports them. And it shows us, because her life is so long, she's almost a century. And so that is rare. So you have somebody who is in touch with W. Du Bois, who's in touch with Marcus Garvey. Who's, you know, you don't have that necessarily, those stories always. And so this book, in this sense, to me, kind of, if you look at it from, you know, coming back, it's really tracking, as you say, you know, that journey. I see more as a journey, whether as opposed to like highs and lows and stuff, because like I said before, in looking at her not so much as an educated person, her education is still there, and it's still important to us, and we're still benefiting from it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Anybody else?
Hi, thank you very much. I grew up knowing about Queen Mother Moore, seeing her in the community, and then when we left Harlem, I moved to Dykeman, and she used to come to our building all the time. Now, we were told that she had a brother in the building, but I hear you keep talking about a sister. I know who this man is. I know what he looked like, and she would come to our building and visit him, completely dressed. But did your research go into anything like First World lecture series that were here in Harlem, and Like It Is, and Lawrence Lucas? Is any of that part of the?
Not a ton of it, no. But I would say that she had two sisters who she was constantly organizing with. I mean, there's a real story here about kind of a band of women that stuck together from the time that their parents died through old age, and they were all just as radical and just, as much. The sisters did marry as well, so maybe what the person you're speaking with was her brother-in-law. And even after the sisters divorced, they still kept in touch with those folks because her sisters did have children as well. So it may be that maybe the person that you're thinking of was somebody that was one of the sisters' husbands. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, could you just clarify that something having to do with the research? It was so fortuitous that you were able to find records in the Catholic what was it, orphanage or
The Archdiocese archives.
But in terms of did you say that blacks were not able to have birth certificates before?
It depends on the state, but in Louisiana that was not the case. But if you were Catholic in your parish, it was one of your rights, right? So they entered it in that way. But there was no formal birth certificate issued by the state for folks like her at that particular time. Was there another?
No,
okay, yeah.
Okay. Brian?
Yeah, hi. Thanks.
Yeah.
Congratulations. Can you say something about the people you interviewed? Like, who did you get to talk to?
Besides Charles over here. I mean, so one of the...
We enjoyed it.
Yeah, of course, yeah. So it was a joy to get to know her family. Like I said, Tom is still, is fantastic and very active. So I would visit with him about once a year in his home in Philadelphia. He has 3 daughters, Audley, Christine, and Judy. Audley and Christine were in Philadelphia, so I would get to speak with them. And Judy is in Chicago, and was actually, I saw her just a couple days ago. So, and one of the things that was really great about that is that none of them had ever been to New Iberia where she grew up. And the locals in New Iberia were putting up a historical marker for her, so we all went down together. And it was like the first time they had seen, where she lived, where her father would have been, all that stuff. So that was very cool. There are any number of activists here and all around the country that were members of the Black Panther Party, that were members of the Revolutionary Action Movement, the Republic of New Africa, some of whom, like in Atlanta, I'm going to be in conversation with that are still around. And so folks like that were great. Also just some past folks that just lived in Harlem and just knew her just in terms of, just seeing her, but not really knowing her personally, to try to get a sense of her, for lack of a better word, her aura, her vibe. So, it really was quite a range. But I think talking to her family in particular was a really rewarding experience, I think. Yeah.
So you had to reassemble a bit of an archive for her.
Yeah.
And what's the future of that archive? And is there material on her in the Smithsonian, for instance? And
Yeah, great question. The state of the archive is that it's mostly on my computer. There's real questions about this that I've been going back and forth with. So on the one hand, I would love for her to get her due in terms of having this place where everybody could come and research. But I think there was something particularly rewarding about encountering somebody's life not in order, if that makes sense. Not just opening box 1, folder 1, looking at a birth certificate and going in order. And also encountering them in the places where they were. So, the archives in the chapter where she's organizing in San Francisco are from San Francisco, right? The archives where she's organizing here are here, right? And you really get a different sense of her relationship to other people when you see it that way versus when it's taken out and kind of put differently. So the answer is we'll see what comes of it. I also think that there's a real question here about somebody who was followed her entire life and kind of indexed and tracked, and how much she owed some privacy by not having all of that so much on display next to us. Yeah. Maybe. Every now and then I would get an email or something, usually through Facebook, and somebody would send me like something that they had like from their attics, or and they'd be like, oh, I heard you were writing about this. I have this flyer. I have this. So maybe as it becomes more relevant. I actually got a message, honestly, on Instagram though today, where somebody said they were going to donate a paper that they had, a tribute to her, to the Auburn Avenue Library where they lived, and it was like a tribute to her in her death. So maybe it will hopefully, bring people that have all these kind of bits and pieces into, kind of more formal archives in that sense. Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about Mount Addis Ababa?
Sure, yeah. So Mount Addis Ababa was a plot of land that Queen Mother Moore and her sisters had in upstate New York. And, again, she's a nationalist, right? She wants Black people to go and live on the land and be separate. And this was kind of her way of doing that in a kind of microcosm, a little effort of that. So it served as everything. It was like a school where kids from the city would go and learn things like canning and like basic survival skills. It was a shooting range for Black folks that were learning how to arm themselves. It was a place where organizers, particularly those who were typically under threat to the government, would go and meet. And she hoped to build a school on there at some point and make it, more of a space, but that never worked out. But in the book, there are beautiful pictures of her and her sisters like organizing and like mowing the land. And I think it was just also a respite for her in some ways to get out of the city.
And you related to the Ku Klux Klan up there?
Yeah, these leading questions. Yes. So part of the reason that it never became a school and a place with a library is that the white supremacists burned it down. And because it started to be a place where people were coming and meeting, and they realized that Black folks were organizing on it. And so what little structures that she started to have, they in fact came and raised it. So, and then she wasn't able to kind of rebuild after that.
Where upstate would that happen?
Parksville. Is that right?
What?
No, that's not right.
I'm sorry?
Parksville?
Where upstate?
Where upstate?
Oh, it was up near Livingston Manor?
Yeah, there we go.
Up near Monticello.
Okay.
Is that wrong word? It's been a long day. I've been up since 4:00.
Farrakhan, they all came up.
Yeah, yeah.
I asked because it was
Yeah.
in the 19th century. There was Timbuktu up around Lake.
Oh yeah.
Placid,
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Thank you for writing this book, Long Time
Yes.
Coming. Like, I first got introduced to Queen Mother Moore during the Million Man March.
Yeah.
But I basically have two questions. One is, did she ever have any interaction with W. Du Bois? And if not, Max Stanford.
Oh yeah.
I was curious because I heard like him do an interview and tell like a bunch of stories about Queen Mother Moore.
Yeah. She did interact and kind of move in the circles of Du Bois. She wrote to him, and she felt frustrated with him because she felt like he was not on the right train of integration. But she did, and she kind of. But she also organized quite often with his wife Shirley Graham Bois. They were moved in the same circles here in Harlem, and were great friends and organizers as well. The second thing, yes, Max Stanford is great. He's in Philadelphia. He is interviewed and featured in the book, so I'll see him tomorrow. But he was, in many ways, he's an activist in Philadelphia, and in many ways kind of became one of Queen Mother Moore's like second sons. He spent a lot of time with her. He organized with her. And he, in fact, had some stuff related to her writings, right? A lot of the stuff that she was talking about, he made an effort to write it down, her organizing philosophies, etc. And he shared that archive that he had with me to be able to write the book. But yes, he features prominently in there.
Anybody else? I see somebody in the back.
I first knew Queen Mother Moore as a student, a high school student. We were members of the African American Students Association, which was in Brooklyn, in the place that became the East, and I've seen her at rallies and a number of places. But I remember also, I'm Marilyn Nance.
Oh, hi, Marilyn. How are you? Look, the gang's all here.
And I'm
See you
sitting
back
there
there.
listening to you, I realized that we have photographs. This is my husband, Al Santana. He's a filmmaker. We have photographs and film of her probably in a lot of different places. But I remember her fussing with someone, and that was her one of her sisters, Mama KK.
No, she did know Mama KK though.
Oh,
Yeah.
They were fussing like siblings.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
A sister in struggle.
Yeah.
Yes. I should say that Marilyn's photos are also in the book. Marilyn is a phenomenal. Yeah.
So we have photographs of
Yeah.
her in different places.
Yeah.
So just listening to you makes me think about the other pictures.
Yeah. Man, thank you for letting me publish some of them. They're fantastic. Yeah.
I have a question,
Sure.
and then maybe we can have maybe one more question after that before we transition to the signing. But when you were talking about the archive and your book kind of acting as its own kind of archive, and thinking about how you encounter an archive and the story that you get from it. What's the story of this archive? I think if people are looking at this a whole life, you talk about not necessarily having the arc of a typical, civil rights or activist story, Black activist story. What's this archive? If we were to say, what do we get? Is it a process archive? What do you want people to take from this?
That's a good question. I think it is the archive of a thinker on the go, like on the move. She's somebody who didn't have, like I said, she didn't have a lot of education, but also she was so busy going to save Black people day by day by day that, sometimes it was, she scribbled a poem down at a protest, which I include in here. She was a poet, not a great one, but she was a poet. Yeah, but I include the poetry there. I'll let you see for yourself. It's somebody who picks up a flyer, on the way. It's somebody that is in a picture in the sea of somebody trying to hold the line in the school desegregation struggles. And then again, when the Republic of New Africa is being formed, right? So I think it's that. It's also just the story of somebody who is constantly just looking out for Black people, no matter where you are, anything and everything. You find her in the archive in surprising places, in places that you would not think you would find a Black nationalist. And that's because even though those were her politics, she was so open to just moving with anybody who was trying to make life better for Black folks that she felt like she could do that and also still hold true to her values. So I think that's it. Okay.
Any other questions? One last one? That's
All
it.
right. Okay.
Well, thank you. Thank you, everybody.